Thank you for joining me on this Thursday, September 28th, and away we go. Now, to this weekend is the last chance I have to do a Saturday night show. So depending on whether or not I'll be able to get any of the guys together, I will go live from the new home setup, and we'll just hang out together there. I'm fine with it. Now, as far as last night goes, there was that the kiddie pool got together again. They got all the kiddie pool, the candidates for the Republican nomination? They all got together, all the children in the kiddie pool, and splashed around for a little bit. And it was literally a splashing game. I looked in on just some highlights because I wasn't going to waste my time. Like I said, last night, it was more of an opportunity. It was more of an opportunity to do like a mystery science theater thing. It literally means nothing. But I didn't do that either. I looked on some highlights, and it's just a bunch of losers screaming over each other. And then, of course, it was capped off, at least for me, with this little ditty from Chris Christie. Because Trump skipped the debate, rightfully so. And boy, oh boy, what a mistake it was for Trump, because look at how he was owned, man. It was just so bad. Listen to this.
Here to answer for that, but he's not. And I want to look at that camera right now and tell you, Donald, I know you're watching. You can't help yourself. I know you're watching, okay? And you're not here tonight, not because of polls and not because of your indictments. You're not here tonight because you're afraid of being on the stage and defending your record. You're ducking these things. And let me tell you what's going to happen. You keep doing that, no one up here is going to call you Donald Trump anymore. We're going to call you Donald Duck.
All right.
If I were Chris Christie, I would have gotten off stage. I would have went to the catering booth, the table. I would have taken the biggest turkey leg and literally choked myself with it until I passed away. Okay? I'm not saying that's what I want to do to him. I'm saying if I were Chris Christie and I did that to myself on national television, I would have went to the catering table, taking the biggest turkey leg I can find, and choked myself with it until I passed away. That would be it. It's just so. Oh, that was so bad. The look he gave afterwards, like, huh, you don't want to get called Donald Duck, do you? Oh my gosh. So, that was, I'm so happy I didn't watch anything else. There you have that. Well, there's a little bit more that we can do in the meantime. Let's jump to MSN.com. Here's the first one up. This should be no surprise to anybody. YouTube is generating music videos for white supremacist groups. Yeah, okay. So let's move on to the next one. TheSun.com, a little bit more on Elon Musk and how he's polluting space. Terrifying video reveals Elon Musk's huge army of satellites as scientists warn of Starlink's hidden danger. There are at most around 9,000 stars visible to Earth's view of the sky, around 5,000 Starlink satellites as of August. 9,000 stars are visible to Earth's view of the sky. That means, like, in a place where there's no light pollution, you can see the sky. There's only 9,000. What they're trying to say here is that sooner than later, for those of us who aren't able to really get a really good, clear, crystal clear view of the night sky, there's going to be as much, if not more, Starlink satellites up there than there are stars we would be able to see with the naked eye. And they put out this, somebody put this out. The orange dots you see on the screen right there, those are all the satellites currently in orbit. According to new research, low-frequency radio waves are leaking into the sky and hurting scientists' ability to make astronomical observations. Sky gazers fear that soon satellites will outnumber the amount of stars there are to see, according to the comments made on Musk's social media platform, formerly Twitter. One onlooker looked at the video saying it was depressing before adding, literally in only a few years, they will outnumber the stars themselves. Gotta love that lack of oversight that allows megalomaniacs to ruin the planet for everyone. You understand that the government funds him? You understand that these expeditions into space and everything else that's being launched up there, we are subsidizing it. These are the people that go out there and they protest against climate change. And they don't realize that the oil companies are in one way or another mysteriously funding these groups. So that's one thing or another. Well, here's another thing for you just to consider before we go on to our break and into the rest of the evening. First, I want to say, don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to help the show grow and help us go viral, I think every show has a potential to be able to present the internet with a little bit of who we are and the fun we have and the times that we've had together over the years and times we'll continue to have, God willing. Make highlights of your own favorite moments of this show. I give you all permission. I am encouraging you to do that. You make little clips of whatever you think was funny, your favorite rants, the more poignant moments, whatever the hell it is. You go and you upload them on Twitter, you upload them onto Rumble, onto YouTube, or you just send the raw files to us, upload it into the Gilded. Tag us, send it in through email, and who knows, perhaps we will be able to re-upload it or at least give it a retweet and get it out there. And you just don't know. You throw enough spaghetti up against the wall and something's going to stick. And I think that out of every 2 hours we spend together, there's at least one thing that'll get passed around a couple of thousand times. We just are such a small operation. And, some people have 1, 2, 3 shows at the most a week. And it's a lot easier to spend those off days chopping things up. We've got 5, sometimes 6 shows a week. 2 hours at a clip. So I just want to put another little thing out there to tickle you all who have at least a little bit of skill to capture some video and put it on out there. Record those timestamps and do your worst, ladies and gentlemen. With that, let's go to something that will kind of get us ready for the opening, like a pre-primer. And this one is from Patrick Wood, who I've tried to get on the show before, and maybe I'll try again. He's giving out a warning on technocracy.news. Reality is escaping out the back door. He said there's a big word that you can add to your vocabulary, and that is simulacrum. Simulacrum, like simulation, simulacrum. I practiced that one before here too. Anyway, simulacrum. It's a hard word to wrap your head around, but one that you are not too likely to forget. Indeed, you should not forget it. Well, I just forgot it from 25 minutes ago. I know what it means, but to say it, man. Collins defines it as an image, a likeness, a vague representation, a semblance, a mere pretense, a sham. Cambridge Dictionary says something that looks or represents something else. So just looking like something, representing something that is real. Purdue University says simulacrum is something that replaces reality with its representation. Jean Baudrillard wrote about this in 1981 paper called The Precession of Simulacra, where he digs deeper, making a distinction between simulation and simulacrum. Whereas representation attempts to absorb simulation by interpreting it as false representation, simulation envelops the whole edifice of representation itself as a simulacrum. Such would be the successive phases of the image. Number 1, it is the reflection of a profound reality. It masks and denatures a profound reality. It masks the absence of a profound reality. It has no relation to any reality whatsoever. It is its own pure simulacrum. So the switch for reality is anti-reality. Quote, the simulacrum is never what hides the truth. It is truth that hides the fact that there is none. Is that confusing you? Well, this whole process does not happen in a vacuum because it involves human agency. Reality exists, but human perception distorts it. Just for review, reality slips into distortion, then into simulation, then finds its resting place in a state of simulacrum. Reality is subsumed by the simulacrum. You can say that that's what's going on right now, but here's an example of it in the making. It is estimated that 90% of all online content will be generated by AI by 2025. This means news, social media posts, chats, pictures, videos, podcasts, websites, etc. A deluge of fake social media accounts will be run by AI. In short, everything. So as described above, a simulacrum is anti-reality. It is not a paradigm shift of reality. It is not a new reality. It is not reality, period. Unfortunately, billions of people risk being captured by it. While everyone is looking at shiny new simulacra forming right before their eyes, reality is escaping out the back door. And now that is a very stark and striking way of describing what's going on with us, not only in a internet sense where so much of the news and so much of everything is going on today, where we're communicating and we're hopefully communicating with other people, trying to break through, trying to cut through the white noise. But you know, there's a lot to say about that questioning of reality, and the perception of reality has a lot to do with what we're talking about tonight, with the life, actual real life, and what happens after that life ends in the afterlife. You know, there's so many people talk about the hereafter and heaven and near-death experiences, those who've been to the other side and come back. And you want to talk about human perception, that is even at play there. So we are always trying to look for universality in something, some kind of a token, some kind of a something that a totem, like we were talking about with the movie Inception, something that gives us the idea that we are watching something real, something that is shared and universally accepted reality, instead of something that is really just up to whatever perception one person from the next has. So I cannot wait to talk about the afterlife, and I can't wait to talk about science in a little bit with Dr. Eben Alexander coming up next. So don't go anywhere and help me share those links. I put them out everywhere. And whether you're watching live or on demand, it'd be great if you can help me share it with everybody you know. Welcome aboard. We'll be right back.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's rock!
Hey. Like a ghost. Good one. This is another good song from Trevor Something. Gotta put this into the network content for Sunday night. That'll be good, right there with Who Framed Roger Rabbit. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so welcome to the show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Here's the first thing I want to jump on before we welcome our guest for the evening. Where we have it. Oh, here we go. This is from the Daily Mail. It came out just a little while ago, a couple of days ago. That's why I said I'm on it. I'm on it. This one's going to work very well for me. Headline is, I died and I saw the afterlife. My deceased relatives turned me away at the pearly gates for an unexpected reason. The first of its kind study provided insight into near-death experiences. Nearly 40% of cardiac arrest patients were still conscious up to an hour. Nearly 40%, that right there, nearly 40% of cardiac arrest patients were still conscious up to an hour. Up to an hour since their heart stopped beating? Researchers claim they have discovered a new dimensions of reality after studying people who came back from the dead. It's a first-of-its-kind study published last week. Found out that a significant number of people remain lucid for up to an hour after their heart stops. The patients told researchers they saw deceased loved ones floated above their bodies and were even involved in high-speed police chases as they were being revived. Some of them saw bright lights and ethereal figures, while others had more harrowing experiences like demons surrounding them. Dr. Sam Parnia, senior study author and critical care physician at NYU Langone in New York City, said, quote, although doctors have long thought that the brain suffers permanent damage about 10 minutes after the heart stops supplying it with oxygen, our work found that the brain can show signs of electrical recovery long into ongoing CPR. Okay, so blood was being pumped by CPR. They were doing chest compressions and breaths. Because how else would this be? That you're conscious for an hour up to the heart stopping and nobody's doing anything to try to keep you around. Delusions and dreams. Patient 1, I heard my name over and over again. All around me there were things like demons and monsters. It felt like they were trying to tear off my body parts, one patient recalled. Well, that's terrible. That's awful. I had a physics teacher. His name was Dr. Payne, Payne. And he promised us at the end of our senior year, at the end of spring senior year, right before we were graduating, that he would tell us his near-death experience story. And I said, okay, this is going to be amazing. So finally, all the regents were over, the finals were over. It was really just the last couple of days of school, and he told us all about what happened to him. He had to go in for brain surgery. We have a neurosurgeon coming on tonight. He had to go in for brain surgery. Something very, very delicate was going on. And to be able to perform this surgery, they had to slowly reduce his body temperature and almost like slowly through dialysis filter out all of his blood and slowly reintroduce it to his body at lower and lower temperatures. So they were chilling his blood so that it could preserve the brain and keep it intact long enough for them to get in there and hopefully perform what would be a life-saving surgery. Well, he went on to tell us all, we're in a Catholic high school, and he went on to tell us all that. Let me tell you about the night before first. He said he was sitting in his bathroom, and he was young, and he was this daunting surgery ahead of him where there was a good chance that he might not make it out, where they're going to have to access his skull and refrigerate his blood and all that stuff. And he said, let me tell you, you can go into the later phases in life in good health, feeling good and confident about everything, and not thinking you don't need God. But when you're sitting in a situation like I was, there's very rarely anybody else you want to talk to except God. That was the first iteration of "There Are No Atheists in Foxholes" story that was told to us. And we're all sitting there rapt, just paying attention because we all really respected Dr. Payne. And then he went into the fact that, or this story that he was outside of his body. He said during the surgery, he can almost feel the cold. There's this cold blood being pumped through his body, so maybe there's that. But he said he was watching the surgery. First, he found himself in a pale blue room. He was in the gown that he had put on, right, going into the operating room, all that stuff, and that he was actually, at a time, able to hover over and watch what was going on with him. And at least some of the things he said that he corroborated with the doctor. I know there's a lot of instances like that. The ability to be outside, that's really the whole thing there. Consciousness outside of the body. Whatever you want to say about heaven, wherever you lean on things like reincarnation or any of that stuff, I'm kind of open to whatever. I'm kind of open to whatever when it comes to that type of stuff. But as far as consciousness being separate from the body, at least temporarily, I think I've seen and heard enough to say, man, I mean, how can you discredit the observer, the ability to be able to observe yourself and see a doctor drop a tool on the floor, something on the floor, and have to have a new one come in, a sterile one or whatever, to be able to see something that you would not know otherwise, than to have some pair of eyes with you open. And this happens over and over again. And for our guest tonight, is Dr. Eben Alexander. He's a neurosurgeon, researcher, lecturer, author of the New York Times bestseller Proof of Heaven, which is an account of a near-death experience he had in 2008 following a very serious brain infection, which put him in a coma for 7 days. And when Dr. Alexander's eyes opened a week later, much to the shock of those who were caring for him, he brought back testimony of an incredible journey into a world that science had convinced him did not exist. And I am so excited to have him on here tonight. Welcome to the show, Dr. Eben Alexander.
Well, Frank, it's great to be here with you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's really an honor. I've had a lot of fun preparing for this episode tonight, and I hope that we don't. Obviously, you're probably going to be asked a lot of questions you've answered over and over again, but there's a lot of new people hearing your story for the first time, and I got plenty of questions. So, let me just jump right into it. In 2008, it's a year that changed the trajectory of your personal and professional life forever. So for those of us who are meeting you for the first time, could you bring us through just the basic circumstances that put you into that coma?
Okay, important to point out, I'd spent the first 54 years of my life honing a very kind of conventional scientific worldview. I had taught neurosurgery at Harvard Medical School 15 years, thought I had a major kind of understanding of the brain and mind relationship and the nature of consciousness. And that was based mainly in kind of materialism or physicalism. That's the conventional notion that only the physical world exists, and therefore the brain must somehow muster consciousness out of physical matter. And what I was headed to was a demonstration that that was not really the way it works, that our consciousness is something that's fundamental in the universe. So what happened to me, I went into coma for 7 days. An atypical feature of my near-death experience was the fact that I was amnesic, that I had no memories of Eben Alexander's life, no knowledge of Earth, humanity, this universe. It really was an empty slate. And I figured out in the months and years after the coma why that was so important. But anyway, the journey to me began in what I call the earthworm eye view, primitive, coarse, unresponsive, like being underground or dirty jello, or what have you. Luckily, that did not last forever. There came a slowly spinning white light that opened up like a portal up into a higher level, and it came packaged with a perfect musical melody. And that's very important because music or vibration or frequency is something I remember as using to traverse these various spiritual realms. So in this Gateway Valley, it was much more real than this world. That's the amazing thing. People often think an NDE would be vague or murky, dreamlike. Well, this world, the material world, is vague and murky and dreamlike compared to that. That realm, the spiritual realm, is sharp, crisp, clear. What you experience there, you can remember forever. It's so impressive. And I was not prepared for that. As a materialist neuroscientist, I didn't know that my consciousness would be liberated to a much higher level of awareness, which is exactly what I witnessed. Now, in that beautiful Gateway Valley were many Earth-like features. I was a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing. I never at any point had any kind of body awareness of this journey. There were millions of other butterflies looping and spiraling in vast formations. And it turns out beside me on the butterfly wing was a beautiful young woman. She turned out to be a spiritual guide or a guardian angel who was very important in the months after my coma to help me determine the reality of the experience. All that is much more fully explained in the book, Proof of Heaven. But her message to me, I think, was the central message I was to bring back to all. And it was not delivered verbally. She never had to say a word. Telepathically, her knowing came into my knowing. And this deep truth, you are loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You are richly cared for. And I cannot tell you how reassuring and loving that message was at the time. And I remember seeing thousands of beings dancing in the meadow down below. I called them souls between lives when I was writing it all up weeks later. And it turns out all the joy and festivities below were being fueled because up above were these swooping orbs of angelic choirs that were emanating chants, anthems, hymns that would thunder through my awareness. So what happened then was Those angelic choirs provided yet another portal to higher and higher levels. I remember seeing all of four-dimensional space-time collapsing down, all of deep time, and a completely different ordering of causality for that spiritual realm that allows you to have a life review where birth, death, and everything in between can be simultaneously presented. All of that collapsed down. And then I entered what I call the core. Core was the complete resolution of all dualities, oneness, coming to realize that the very source of conscious awareness was that infinitely loving God force that so many billions of near-death experiencers have witnessed on their own and brought back to this world. And it turns out I would cycle through all these levels multiple times, but there came a point where even though I thought that conjuring up the musical notes of the melody would always help me to rejoin this kind of pathway going up into these realms, and whenever I spontaneously tumbled down to that earthworm eye view, there came a point where that no longer worked. And at that point, I was aware of thousands of beings going off into the distance, heads bowed, murmuring energy coming from them. And that I called in my writings the power of prayer. That's what was kind of drawing me back. Though I still didn't know what it was back to. The final scene in my near-death experience, 6 faces that appeared. 5 of them were very important because they were family and friends there the last 24 hours of coma. And of importance, there were many other family and friends there earlier in the week who I had no memory of. So those particular faces appearing at that point showed me the vast majority of the coma journey had to happen between days 1 and 4 or 1 and 5 of the 7-day coma. And I explain all that timing in the book, Proof of Heaven.
Okay.
At any rate,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say the last of those faces is what brought me back. That was a 10-year-old boy. I didn't recognize him because of my amnesia, but he was pleading with me, Dad, you're going to be okay. It turned out it was my son. His name is Bond. And they had protected him from the worst news during that week. But now he'd overheard that I'd gone from a 10% chance of survival down to 2%, no chance of recovery. He knew that was bad news, and that's why he came and pulled open my eyelids and was pleading with me to be okay. Now, I was pretty much gone from this world by that point. One eye over there, neither pupil working. Anybody in medicine knows that's a horrible picture. But somehow his pleading with me was enough to get me back to this world. Took me 2 months to recover. When I first woke up in that ICU room, I didn't even recognize my mother, my sisters, my sons, but those memories came back very, very rapidly over hours and days. Full memories returned within 2 months. And then I've spent 15 years since then working with other scientists around the world, trying to understand how all this can be. But the reality is the science of consciousness is leading us towards a big realization about the nature of spirit and eternity of soul. That's basically what scientifically is being validated here.
Wow, there's so much so much I was going to ask you about that. I want to go back to a few things you said to get a little bit more on that. Now, you said that there was no real body presence there. There was a little more of a communal consciousness you were seeping into, but you were talking about the sounds, and I want to talk about sounds later on, but what about other sensory, was there any other senses engaged? Was there a smell to heaven, a feel, a taste even? Anything like that?
There was a lot to it. In fact, there was more to that than we normally experience in this world. There was more of the kind of blending of information coming from all these different directions. In fact, I even used the word synesthesia in Proof of Heaven, which is what psychologists term when you, for example, you can see sounds or you can hear colors and things like that. When you have a cross modality of sensory function, but it's much more than that, and it really shows us how it's interesting. One of the key problems for neuroscience is called the binding problem, and that is, how is it that consciousness appears to be so unified in us if it's generated by a whole bunch of different neuronal networks, neuron populations generating this consolidation? Why is it so unified? And the answer is because it's unified coming in. We're actually sharing a very unified conscious mind. And that's what I was witnessing very fully in that form. So there's an expansion of kind of sensory awareness. There are colors beyond the rainbow, and you're also up out of time. So you can witness multiple events temporally spread out through Earth time, but appearing simultaneously and interconnected. This is one of the reasons why we say these are ineffable. indescribable, because the sensory modalities and being completely elevated out of our normal temporal time flow that we're used to on Earth is very kind of surprising. And it's what loads you up with so much information and makes it so difficult to kind of come back here and tell it like it is. You cannot describe how fantastic and robust an experience that kind of thing is. And yet near-death experiencers have been talking about that for thousands of years across all cultures. So
yeah, well, on time, I was going to ask you what time is, but since that's a little bit too broad of a question, let me just ask, over the course of the 7 days that you are essentially gone from this world, how do you know what experiences you're having on which days on Earth over there on the other side? Especially since there's, did 7 days over there feel like a mere afternoon? Oh, no, 7 days over there feel like a mere afternoon over here? I mean, what was that?
No, there's a complete time distortion because you are no longer limited by Earth time. So what I witnessed, if you would ask me in those first days after I woke up, how long were you gone? I would have said something like months or years. It seemed like a very long, detailed journey. And yet we know that people can have profound life reviews that seem to be a complete review of their life, even during a 4 or 5 minute cardiac arrest. So you can no longer think that there are any limitations on what can happen in that spiritual realm, given a certain time interval here on Earth. That's probably the most important thing to get. And that, loved ones can be 6 decades deceased from this world over there, and yet they are there to welcome us when we leave the physical plane here. So time flow over there is not a constraint as much as it is here.
Now, as far as your family goes, you said you saw 5 faces. What about the face and spirit guides or a guardian angel? Any interaction or confrontation with the face of God or the voice of God? Anything that you
there was an absolute sense in the core realm. Remember, the highest I went in this the sanctum sanctorum of the divine, where all dualisms are completely consolidated into oneness. And that's where what I sensed, and I described this in the book Proof of Heaven, in that core realm, how there was this brilliant infinite ocean of love, of that God force. And there was also this brilliant orb of light that I thought was there to serve as a translator or interpreter. And yet what I came to recognize, there was kind of an oscillation that was between the purest of oneness and the very first levels of coming away from that oneness towards this world. And that oscillation is what allowed me to appreciate that my very conscious awareness was directly sourced in that God force. So in other words, we're sharing the mind of the universe. Now, this is about as far from an ego mind as you could possibly get. The ego mind is left way back in the rearview mirror on this kind of a journey. But that becoming one with that God force is something other near-death experiencers have also described, that being part of that oneness. It's not like you could be separate from it. So yes, that God force is something, and I will also add that more than 90% of near-death experiences going back thousands of years across all cultures, and many of these might have been atheist or agnostic before their experience, but more than 90% of them come back believing, knowing in a loving personal presence at the core of the universe. Now, I don't care if you want to try and call that God, Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, Great Spirit. We can play games all day about trying to name it, but ultimately, what is an ingredient of people who have come close to death and then come back to this world is bathing in that ocean of oneness with that God force, and so really it doesn't get much clearer than this, that that God force is absolutely real. It's pure love, compassion, kindness, mercy, acceptance, when necessary, forgiveness. Those are the qualities of that God force, and no religion owns it. The closer any religion is to truly being all-inclusive and completely loving, caring, kindness, compassion, that religion is getting close to the spirituality of NDEs. But otherwise, religions have lost their way. if they're not promoting that extreme oneness and love and compassion and care for others, caring for the least, the last, and the lost, then they've fallen away from the direct message from near-death experiencers going back thousands of years.
I have more on that I wanted to throw at you, but I also just want to put on out there again, because you just mentioned atheists and agnostics who have these experiences. I've heard you speak about your father, because he was a doctor, a scientist as well. You spoke about his work many times on. I've watched so many of your speeches, namely how he was a man of science, but his faith took precedent, and he never believed that our human endeavors could ever bring us anywhere near an understanding of God. But this kind of reverence for the supernatural was not the case for you. Prior to your coma and this experience, you were a lot more of a modern, science first kind of a guy, right?
Yeah. Well, it's important to point out my father was very scientific. I mean, my God, he was the ultimate in physics, cosmology, neuroscience, neurosurgery, etc. But he was very comfortable with a love of personal God and the power of prayer. And he used that in his work as a neurosurgeon. Now, like many people who grew up in the 60s and 70s, that's me, I grew up knowing that science is the pathway to truth. I made the mistake so many other people make. They think that our conventional materialist, physicalist science that only believes in the physical realm and thinks that the brain creates consciousness, I thought that was the truth. And so this was showing me very clearly that that is not the case. In fact, there is a medical case report on my medical records, came out September 2018 in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease, by 3 doctors not involved in my care, but actually shocked by my recovery. And that case report is very important. You can get to it on my website on ebenalexander.com. But the 2 points they make, one is that my brain was in no shape to harbor any kind of dream or hallucination. That's what kind of shocked me initially, was as I went through my medical records, I realized that brain was in no way capable of putting out a dream or hallucination, much less the most profound experience of my lifetime. So, and the other main point they made in the case report is that my recovery is really inexplicable from our normal medical scientific analysis. There are no cases like this in the medical literature. And in fact, when the authors were challenged, how do you explain this miraculous recovery? They said it's because he had a near-death experience, because they all knew that there were other cases like mine of near-death experiences where you have healing that is completely inexplicable. Miracles occur quite commonly in that near-death experience setting, which to some might be no surprise. You'd think, okay, if they're coming back from death, something mighty amazing has happened. But when you really get down to the medical details and you realize that I should not have been able to recover, at 2% chance of survival, fine, but they were projecting I'd spend the rest of my life in a nursing home, unable to care for myself. Well, that's not what happened. So anyway, this is an extraordinary case, and other NDEs are like that out there in the world to help us come into a deeper understanding of healing, in a grand sense.
Well, you said that it took about 2 months for you to start regaining the totality of your memories prior to, or is that just the totality of your memories prior to or in leading up to the coma, or is that all of the memories of your time away as well?
No. The memories of the time away were there from the get-go. The memories from the spiritual journey, absolutely rock solid from day one.
Wow.
In fact, I remember them as briskly as if they all happened yesterday. And of note, there was a 36-hour period of a psychotic nightmare that I was in and out of after my coma, after they took out the breathing tube. And those memories disappeared within weeks. So I'm glad I wrote all that down so I could remember it. But the memories from the deep coma experience, they were always there. But to answer your question, the memories that were coming back were the memories from the amnesia. That is from before my coma.
Wow.
When I first woke up from the coma, I had no memories of Eben Alexander's life. That's why I didn't recognize loved ones at the bedside. But memories of them came back so quickly over days that all of that was returning. By 2 months, what had happened is all my memories had come back. And the surprising thing, we discussed this in detail in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, co-written with Karen Newell, my partner. is that memories are not stored in the brain. It's one of the last nails in the coffin of materialist neuroscience. But the reality is, as neurosurgeons have come to suspect over the last few decades, memories are not stored in the physical brain. We have access to them just as we do access to consciousness, but neither consciousness nor memory is resident in the brain itself.
That was definitely something I was going to ask you about, because, you know, especially when you're describing all this stuff going on with your brain not being able to, you're essentially being brain dead, and there's no functionality enough to even generate a dream. How can any of these experiences be, you know, consciously, I don't know, downloaded, uploaded, anything like that, without the consciousness being the main fact that the brain is actually a tool that is used by the consciousness? Because how would you be able to generate consciousness at all? But then again,
well, you're right, and the thing is, ultimately, in this kind of discussion, you come to what you call an ontological primitive. That is, what is the thing that exists? Now, for the scientist in me before my coma, the thing that exists was the physical world. And everything in it, just following the laws of physics, chemistry, biology, etc. But what we now have to envision is that that's not the be-all and end-all, that there's actually information passed to us throughout space and time beyond the confines of the here and now of the material world. And this is where things like telepathy are very important to point out, that our minds can have a meld with other minds. Something like 35% of identical twins have strong telepathic experiences, and many other people have telepathic experiences. Remote viewing, this is another example of mind kind of expanded beyond the here and now of the self. Distance healing, things like that. And in fact, in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, we go into a large amount of detail about all these different lines of inquiry, all the evidence for non-local consciousness, to help in discussing this proposal that consciousness is primordial in the universe, that we're really sharing one mind. That's why telepathy is real. That's why remote viewing is real. And then, of course, you get into the entire world of not only near-death experiences, but shared death experiences, which have identical qualities to near-death, but often happen in perfectly normal people. Those are people who are usually loved ones of a dying person. So their soul can be taken along, even to witnessing a full-blown life review, before that bystander soul comes back to this world. You have after-death communications that have happened in about 50+% of our population. Very strong indicators of an ongoing relationship with a loved one who has left the physical plane. And then you have that whole host of things that happen in the hospice world, people who are actually dying. Dr. Christopher Kerr of Buffalo Hospice recently wrote a book called Death is But a Dream. And he's only studying people who are dying. But what he finds is 89% of those people have end-of-life dreams and visions that are very vivid. And of the ones who have them, 99% say it's more real than this world. These visions they have of loved ones who are returning to help escort them over. Now, of course, before coma, I would have told you that's nonsense, it's wishful thinking. Now I will tell you that when that kind of thing happens, it happened to my own mother in 2019 at age 99, when she was passing over. She saw her own mother come. And her mother had passed back in 1987 or so, but her mother was young and vibrant and alive. When I heard that, I knew my mother was absolutely within hours to days of leaving this physical world. It's not a hallucination or wishful thinking when they see a loved one. It is a true example of how our souls are interconnected beyond the grave.
Wow, I was going to ask you what the biggest foundational questions that you set out there to answer is, and I guess that is, what is consciousness? It's one thing to say, oh, it's being awake and aware, but stories like yours, as I said before, make it seem impossible that consciousness is manufactured by the physical brain itself, especially when your brain has been disabled. And I was going to ask you about the Guggenheims and after-death communication, and what you thought about all that, and I'm sure we can go into that more. But let me just ask you first. Now that you've woken up, you are you've had your memories of your experience intact it's the most real thing, which I think is really interesting as you're talking about that world being realer than this one. Because, when we wake up from a dream over here, it's, when it starts running away, we get fragments of our dream. It's amazing how your life before the coma is pretty much like how we experience fragments of dreams coming back over the course of the day after waking up. And it was the inverse with you, as if the real reality was away from this plane. But how soon after did you start beginning your research, and what did you decide was the most important thing to investigate first?
Well, initially, I must say I was my own worst skeptic. Remember that when I woke up, I had no memory of neuroscience, neurosurgery, etc. And I told my doctors what had happened to me, and they would just pat me on the back and say, well, you can forget about it, because the dying brain plays all kinds of tricks. Your brain was soaking in pus. We have no idea how you're even coming back to us now. You were so sick, but forget about it. So I took that, doctors tell us things, and that's what I thought. My own doctor knowledge was coming back to me over the next 2 months. But I remember telling my older son, Eben the fourth, who's majoring in neuroscience at the time in college, and he came home and surprised me 2 days after I got out of the hospital. Great reunion, day before Thanksgiving, big hugs. He told me much later it was like there was a light shining within me. I was far more present than I'd ever been before. But I remember telling him, I said it was way too real to be real. That's the way I put it into words, because to me, the memories were shockingly real, detailed. There was no way of letting go of that, especially because I had almost no other memories of anything else in my life. Those memories were still to be returning. And so it was shocking. But then what happened, of course, is I was going into the hospital, follow-up appointments, talking to my doctors, going through medical records and neurologic exams, looking through MRI, CT scans, lab values, and it wasn't lining up. I was studying a brain of somebody who was destined to die, someone who's horribly ill from meningitis and absolutely incapable of having any kind of mental awareness at all with that amount of damage to the brain. That's what I was looking at. And yet I knew what I had experienced was much more real, vibrant, and memorable and transformational than anything I'd ever experienced in my lifetime. So how to reconcile that? Well, I can give you an example. The recent scientific papers, and this is something we discuss in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, a bunch of papers from the last 12 years looking at psilocybin, LSD, DMT, other psychoactive substances. And what you find is if with functional MRI, magnetoencephalography, look at the brain, people under the influence of those substances, and you find the brain is turning off. It's getting out of the way. No part of the brain shows any increase in activity. The default mode network, which is kind of a big network that gives us a sense of being present in the here and now as an ego self, that whole default mode network dissolves under the influence of those substances. So in other words, similar case to me. Get rid of my neocortex with meningitis, my awareness expands tremendously. Get rid of someone's, use psilocybin to take down their neocortex by turning down the default mode network, et cetera, and allow the other processes that give consciousness to come in, and you have these extraordinary experiences. We got to get over the myth that the brain is creating consciousness. It is not. We are conscious in spite of our brain. And for anybody who really needs more evidence of the reality of the afterlife, where I would steer you is bigelowinstitute.org. Go to bigelowinstitute.org. You will find 28 papers written by experts in the field of afterlife studies. They all have to have demonstrated at least 5 years experience. And those 28 papers will show you the reality of the afterlife. And the scientific question about consciousness has only got to be much richer, bigger, and more profound. That's where we're headed, is trying to answer that more deeply. But it just turns out we live in a far more fascinating universe than the puny little mechanistic universe that I used to believe was all the be all and end all.
Well, I mean, you're definitely 5 steps ahead of me every time I ask a question. But then again, you've been talking about this for so many years. I was going to ask you about psychedelic drugs, but I'm so shocked to hear that, because when I think about somebody taking DMT, or they're going to psychedelics, I think most people would think that if you put some kind of a brain monitor on there, your brain would be lighting up like a Christmas tree because
Exactly.
You're being stimulated.
And
but
yet that's the opposite
it's the
of what's
opposite.
happening. Your brain is going dark. And I was just blessed with kind of a super psychedelic experience in the form of meningitis that completely eradicated my neocortical function to allow me to experience that much purer form of consciousness in the form of a near-death experience. So, and every NDE is tailored to the individual who's having it. And it just so happens that, a neurosurgeon with big interest in brain, mind, consciousness, nature, reality ended up having a big, powerful NDE that showed him a whole lot about answering those questions. But it helps all the rest of us to answer those questions too. And we're moving beyond the simplistic falsehood that the brain creates consciousness. And consciousness is much bigger than that. And in fact, does not end when our brain and body die, but is liberated to a much higher, grander form.
Well, you just said there that the NDE is like tailored to the person having it. And, so I wanted to ask you this one here about, well, every night I speak to a large audience with mixed spiritual and religious beliefs, majority Christian, myself included, and we often hear so much variety about these near-death accounts. And over time, it makes people like me say, well, I believe in life after death, but perhaps what people are experiencing, these NDEs, is a combination of, like you were saying before with your doctor friends, imagination, hallucination, and some memory mixed in. So what I would ask you, doctor, is how would you go about showing that there is any universality to the afterlife experience? Because that's what most people want to know, that there is a universality here that cannot be denied.
There is a universality. All you have to do is study NDEs. I can give you a very good resource. It's a book written by a friend of mine, Robert Koppes, C-O-P-P-E-S. He's from the Netherlands, and he has written a beautiful book called The Essence of Religions. He takes the 5 major religions, compares them with near-death experiences, basically taking the near-death experience as the gold standard. I mean, after all, religions were created largely to explain what happens when we die. So why not use NDEs to tell us what direction everything should head? And what you'll find is that NDEers, by and large, completely agree about unconditional love, about kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance, forgiveness, taking care of the least, the last, and the lost. They come back much more empathic and intuitive, and caring about people and about animals and about, all the beings of this planet, having realized from that spiritual level that we are all part of that divine and sacred God force, that God mind at the core of the universe. And so NDEs can steer the way. But the essential lessons really have to do with, very simply, unconditional love, kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance, when necessary, forgiveness, and of course, never forget gratitude. But these are the main ingredients that come out of the NDE community. Anything else is falling short. And whenever a religious ideology starts leading us towards being against other people, fighting other people, judging other people, that religion has run out of steam. It's lost track of the message of the original prophets, which is a message of love, kindness, compassion, and mercy, and taking care of each other. This is the fundamental message from near-death experiences. We need to move away from the simplistic falsehood of materialist science. It was pretty much materialism, physicalism was given up by science about 80 years ago with quantum physics. But there are many who are still very, very confused over that. And quantum physics, is now the law of the land, given the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2022 for entanglement to John Clauser, Alain Aspect, and Anton Zeilinger. That's a very important step, because entanglement is basically a demonstration of information connection across this universe that is there because of the mental layer of the universe, the part that mind actually uses. And that entanglement is a phenomenon that shows us our minds are connected too. There are quantum physicists out there who will, have trouble figuring all this out, but I promise you, as you learn more about consciousness, you'll realize that this model with the primacy of consciousness and the unification of consciousness is really where all the evidence points. And that's where we're headed. Is a version of what I would call evolutionary panentheism, which is basically that God force being all throughout this universe. All of us as sentient beings have, an eddy current of that primordial mind that we consider to be our mind, but that's the part that gets liberated at the time of bodily death.
I've heard you refer to the brain as a filter, as a kind of vehicle that our consciousness must occupy to experience material reality. And that's, I was even alluding to that as well before when we were talking about what came first, the consciousness or the brain. And however, it is very, it's a very restrictive vehicle that doesn't really allow for our consciousness to experience the full sensations that you felt on the other side. So why do you think we incarnate into this dimension where our senses are so dulled?
I think we do it because this is where we learn and we teach. This is where we grow. We're sharing the dream of the one mind. In essence, that one mind I've been talking about, that God mind, is learning and growing and transforming. It takes us back to the writings of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the mid-20th century. He wrote a book called The Phenomenon of Man. He was a French paleontologist, so he was a scientist working with billion-year timescales. He was also a Jesuit priest, so he was aware of spirituality. He came to realize in those discussions of Darwinian evolution of the mid-20th century that there was an evolution going on, but he recognized it to be much bigger. He saw that all of consciousness was evolving. And I would say that is what is happening. That's why we call it evolutionary panentheism, because free will is involved. We contribute our free will. And don't take free will for granted, because materialist scientists would laugh at you if you claim to have free will. They think it's all chemical reactions, electron fluxes in the brain, make nothing of it. Consciousness is a complete illusion to them, epiphenomenal, whatever you want to call it. And yet what this new science, quantum-informed science of consciousness, that takes all these pieces of evidence, as we do in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, it really points to the primacy of consciousness. And most investigators get there and have gotten there because of the evidence. But then they kind of struggle with this notion of duality. And they say, okay, mind is not something you can completely reduce to brain alone, but they must work in parallel somehow. But ultimately, I think we're moving towards a recognition that it's really that mental layer of the universe that really has everything to do with what happens in our lives. And we have access to that. And that is something that allows us access far beyond just the here and now that we experience with our body and its kind of ego presence. So all of this allows through meditation and centering prayer to expand our kind of efforts. And this is where I would recommend to people, if they need a tool for meditation, the one I use and have been for the last 10 years on a daily basis, go to sacredacoustics.com. You can learn a lot more about it. It's basically using binaural brainwave entrainment, which affects the lower brainstem. That's one of the reasons it's so powerful in allowing us to be freed up from the here and now and sense of self in deep meditative exercises. So if you visit sacredacoustics.com, you can learn a lot more about that, a very instructive site. But this is really all about coming to acknowledge our eternal soul, and not that we're just in these bodies birth to death. We're much more than that. And the last part of the discussion we haven't gotten into yet is the reincarnation aspect. Because, before my coma, I had never even thought reincarnation was possible. But after my coma, it was clear to me that I had to explain reincarnation because it had to be part of the package. And that's when I discovered, for example, all the work done at University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies over 60 years. People can learn more at uvadops.org. But basically, they have something like 2,700 cases of past life memories in children they've investigated since the 1960s. And of those 2,700, 1,700 are solved. That means they actually found the person who the child describes. And, one or two of those cases might be fabricated or kind of who knows what's going on. But 1,700 cases, they're telling us reincarnation is absolutely real. Doesn't matter what you want to believe about it. Doesn't matter that you can't remember it, because as the doctors Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker, who did all this work, will tell you, you have to ask the children before age 6 or 7 because the memories get covered over. So most of us after age 7 don't have memories of past lives. But you can check with young children and you'll find them there. And then you find those 1,700 cases in the UVA literature where they actually found the person who lived before, and the child was accurate about many of the things, names, locations, events, etc. In fact, in 1/3 of Stevenson's cases, they had a birthmark that corresponded to the lethal wound of the prior lifetime. Now, if that doesn't get your, attention, I don't know what will. But the bottom line is, in this brain-mind discussion, we've been far too simple in past decades, but now it all comes together with quantum physics, philosophy of mind, neuroscience, and the hard problem, non-local consciousness. All of this is stuff we put together in Living in a Mindful Universe, and people can learn a lot more at ebenalexander.com from my recommended reading list, from the FAQ page, and also from many of the interviews that are available there.
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say about the reincarnation thing is that if we learn lessons of all of our key decisions that we've made during our lives, and we have some sort of an end-of-life review, that it's still so frustrating to re-enter the material realm as a baby with a blank slate and have to do all that over again. You would think that you'd come back with some notes written down or some kind of a leg up so it doesn't take another 35 years.
The reality is, a lot of this science and this discussion is used to explain genius. For example, musical genius or mathematical or scientific genius. Where does that come from? That mathematician in India, Ramanujan. How in the world did some little boy who grew up in a tiny little village somewhere in India come into such great mathematical wisdom? Much of his stuff is still far beyond our mathematics of today. And there are many scientists in this line of work that we're talking about who will tell you that reincarnation is the explanation for those incredible cases of genius, that they come from people who had lived before in some form or another. And there are stories out there like that. But the bottom line is we need to open our minds to much greater possibilities, given the reality of reincarnation and all the powers that we can show we have for healing. To me, that's the biggest, most important message I have to share, is that we can help heal ourselves through envisioning kind of the health and perfection and wholeness that we like for ourselves. And also remember that by channeling that love of the universe, serving as a conduit for that love, and sharing that love with our fellow beings, do random acts of kindness for strangers. Every bit of that is part of this package. But what you find is that when you hand love out to the universe has a way of giving love back to you. So it's all a beautiful kind of transformative gift. This is nothing, the simplest parts of this are the most obvious and elegant, and that is that we're really here to love each other and take care of each other and get rid of this false sense of separation from, materialist science, which treats everything as a separate object, and realize that the quantum-informed view of consciousness is one where we're all truly sharing the dream of the one mind. We're all in this together, and we really need to take care of each other.
Very well said. Very well said. I have a few more things I'd love to ask of you. I mean, the first thing, because I can see this passion is still very alive. You bubble with it, and I wonder, has your personal research and revelations helped you, or I should say, how has it helped you treat patients going forward from that point in your life, especially those who are facing life-threatening prognosis or it's not looking good? I'd have to imagine having you as a doctor at that point, if you're helping a patient who is in a really dire situation, must be a leg up that most other people don't have.
Well, that's very true. It certainly has helped me to be far more empathic and intuitive and connected with people. In fact, this 2 weeks ago, I was down at my alma mater at Duke Medical School, where I also finished residency there in neurosurgery, and we were having a big reunion of all the neurosurgical trainees from the last half century or more. And I gave a 10-minute talk on this very topic, all the way up to reincarnation, et cetera. But it was to help my colleagues, to help them to understand, first of all, that this scientific question of consciousness is far more interesting than we might have thought before, but also especially important to recognize this kind of continuity of soul line, and that we're all in this together and here to take care of each other, but also the great and comforting knowledge that loved ones who have left the physical plane can be there for us and be there to help usher us over. And the more doctors, and now a lot of nurses already get this, because they're there with patients and families when people die. Doctors are not as prone to do that. Because for doctors, often they feel they failed the patient, so they're not necessarily going to be there when the patient is dying, even though that might just be a death that has nothing. All of the best the doctor did could not prevent it. But just like I wrote Proof of Heaven to help wake up the medical profession so that doctors would be more inviting of people to tell these stories, and just like I gave that talk at Duke 2 weeks ago, it's really all about waking all of us up. And I knew that by waking up the medical profession, that would be a big step forward, because then they can start sharing millions and millions and millions more of these NDE stories. Because what you find is they're very, very common. In fact, if you ask around your neighborhood, you'll probably find somebody who's had this kind of thing happen, an after-death communication, a deathbed vision, a near-death experience, shared death, what have you. They're extremely common. And ultimately, the scientific world will catch up with the rest of the world. The rest of the world is all the people having these experiences and wanting explanations and wanting understanding. And that is what this quantum-informed science of consciousness that I'm talking about is bringing forth to the public at large. Now, also 2 other sites for you people who want to follow the scientific line of inquiry into this discussion. Go to scientificandmedical.net and GalileoCommission.org. Those are 2 groups. I serve as a scientific advisory board member for both of them. But you will find there's a tremendous amount of global effort from the scientific community to come to a deeper understanding of all of this that we're talking about. It's obviously a gigantic mystery, and the nonsensical BS response of materialist neuroscientists who pretend to know that this is all impossible because it doesn't fit their theoretical model, well, it's time for them to move over. What they should do is start reading BigelowInstitute.org essays and realize we're far beyond this being an issue of whether or not this is scientifically valid. That in fact, science not only allows, but demands for this kind of spiritual level of the universe, this unified mind, this kind of top-down causality. And that's where the world is now. It's for me, it's very optimistic, what it opens up in terms of possibilities, but we really need to wake up and move away from this nonsense of believing we're separate beings in competition with each other and realize we're all in this together. We need to take better care of each other and much better care of planet Earth.
Very, very,
we're in the process of destroying through that materialist greediness and selfishness and focus on individuality as opposed to this group survival and the higher good of the group.
It would be great if we were concentrating on things like that a little bit more. And I think that as the world gets more and more twisted, there are more and more people in turn who are pushed into this direction of just knowing that there's got to be something more. And I think to put them on this path eventually, that they're having more mystical and really inspiring conversations. Do you think it's possible to recreate the melody or the resonant vibration of light that brought you up into that valley? The music in particular, because we've had so many shows, Dr. Alexander, about somatics and resonant frequency and what it does to everything. I mean, just to being able to lift spirits. I mean, we know that Gregorian chanting, bells, bowls, churches and cathedrals were built with acoustics in mind. Some have even presented really compelling evidence that many chambers of the Egyptian pyramids were tuned to specific frequencies for one reason or another. So have you had, in any of your pursuits, been able to recreate that melody that you felt on the other side?
Well, that's a beautiful question. And yes, originally we were trying to do that kind of thing. But what I came to recognize early on, and this was work I was doing with my partner, Karen Newell, her business partner, Kevin Cossey, the 2 of them co-founded Sacred Acoustics. And we were trying to duplicate those sounds. But what I ended up discovering, and this is why I got into binaural beat brainwave entrainment in the first place 2 years after my coma, was I knew that they held potential to really influence conscious awareness, and especially to liberate conscious awareness from the here and now and the illusion of self. And it's because every other sound you've ever heard, and this includes chants, anthems, hymns, that might have influenced some spiritual state, they were all sounds processed up in the acoustic cortex of the temporal lobes, in circuits that have basically evolved in the last 2 to 3 million years in primates and Homo sapiens. Very, very different are sacred acoustics and other binaural beat signals, because they use slightly different frequencies going to the two ears. And if you listen through headphones or through earbuds, so you're splitting the channel, you're doing a very good job of using those signals to oscillate the lower brainstem. A neuronal population there in the superior olivary nucleus starts oscillating back and forth. And many people are aware of using like a pendulum before the eyes, to get hypnotic induction. Likewise, people use EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That's a very effective treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. And this also is using rapid eye movements, which is driving a left-right oscillation at the midbrain level. So we're just talking about going even more primitive, even more down the evolutionary pathway to a circuit that arose more than 300 million years ago. That's before mammals walked the earth. In fact, it's a localization circuit still active. If I hear a snap behind my head, that circuit calculates arrival time of the sound waves to my two ears going 1,000 feet per second, and using a tens of microsecond calculator in that lower brainstem, it causes that oscillation. Now, what this does is it ends up modulating the upgoing signals from the ignition part, the reticular activating system, and that modulation of 40 times per second. By taking control of that with these differential frequency brainwaves, that is what is allowing you to get into a state where you can put your little linguistic brain and ego voice into timeout and learn to ride the tones of sacred acoustics. And you'll find that it'll get you into that hypnagogic space between awake and asleep very effectively. Do pay attention to some of the guidance that Karen gives on our website, sacredacoustics.com, for some other techniques and suggestions about meditation. But the bottom line is it's a very powerful technique to use. And in fact, it's been very much validated in a busy Manhattan psychiatric practice for anxiety treatment. There's a paper by Dr. Anna Yusim, Y-U-S-I-M. We've worked with her before. She's an excellent spiritually inclined psychiatrist in New York, Yale trained. And she wrote an article. It was in, I think, February of 2020. And that article is on binaural beats. And basically, she found in her Manhattan practice, over 2 weeks of listening to binaural beats, 26% reduction in anxiety symptoms. That's compared to only 7% reduction in the control group, who only got talk psychotherapy for anxiety. So very, very effective at anxiety, and obviously can do a lot of other things too. So highly recommended that people start going within, start meditating, exploring that mental space. You'll find it's far, far grander than just something stuck between your ears.
Yeah, we've done quite a bit on this show with the Monroe Institute, reading into what they've done with binaural beats, with PTSD, but also other out-of-body experiments, astral travel and things like that. So we know how powerful they are, especially if used right. They can be very therapeutic, very mind altering and opening. I have to ask you a little bit more of a negative question, and then one last question that only a neurosurgeon would be able to answer, about negative NDEs, or people who have been pronounced dead and just had the lights go out, or they've had horrific things going on there. Is there a hell? I mean, we've had psychopaths, murderers. Are you telling me that psychopaths and unrepentant psychopaths are getting the same sunshine on their face in that valley that you did?
Well, I think it's important to remember that they have to go through a life review. And the life review is where you receive what you've handed out to others. So if people have been busy handing out a lot of pain and suffering to others, their life review is certainly going to seem like a hellish experience. The good news is that you can learn from all this. Now, I'm not saying that, the life review of somebody like Hitler is going to be something that allows his soul to kind of dance right through, learn everything, et cetera, because he has to go through the suffering of more than 53 million people, and on the receiving end, before he is done with kind of his karmic debt for this lifetime. So, but just remember that's part of the package. And life reviews are very interesting. Bruce Grayson, who has more than 45 years as a skeptical MD studying these experiences, finds that the majority of people who have a life review experience it as a reliving of the events, not just remembering. And not only that, 74% of them relive it not only from their own perspective, but the perspective of everybody involved. So it's pretty astonishing, but you end up feeling what you handed out to other people because of that life review. So over a period of time, the life review nudges our entire civilization more towards love and kindness and compassion, because essentially the life review is the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated, written into the very fabric of the universe. So very important to understand. And this life review, it's not some new age concept. This goes back at least 2,400 years to the writings of Plato. He wrote about Armenian soldier killed in battle, who came back to life just before they lit up the funeral pyre. And he said, when you die, your life flashes before your eyes, and you find that the only important thing is how much love you were able to share with the world. And that could be a similar story on a battlefield today, or any other cause of death today. So it's really important for all of us to understand we need to treat each other's with love, compassion, kindness, respect, as the sacred beings that we are, and move away from this insane materialist kind of assumption of separation that all of us are just meat robots, birth to death, nothing more. That is not true. We are spiritual beings in a spiritual universe, and that can have tremendous power in bringing all of us into wholeness and healing.
Wonderfully said. Now, here's one last question for you, and I really appreciate the time. This was really something to behold, and I know that it's going to inspire a lot of conversation in the afterward. I had opened up tonight's show talking a little bit about a story that a old physics professor at my high school had told us around the time that we were graduating. His name was Professor Payne, Dr. Payne. And he was talking about a time when earlier on in life, where he was in a really bad situation with some kind of a issue with his brain, and he needed surgery. And the surgery was a very testy one. And what they had to do was they had to pretty much put him through dialysis to bring his temperature down, and to almost like chill his blood, he was talking about, in an effort to preserve brain tissue long enough for this. Have you ever done anything like that?
Oh, I know what you're talking about, using cryopreservative techniques to cool down the body, cool the brain. That's something that is sometimes done, for example, very challenging aneurysms like a basilar tip aneurysm. Sometimes you have to basically shut off all circulation to the brain. And the only way to safely do that is to really cool it down and put it into deep medication-induced coma. And then you can just stop blood flow, and the brain will survive for a certain period of time.
Well, this was all part of. That's one thing, because he was telling a class full of young boys in a Catholic high school in White Plains, New York, about the night before going into the operating room and having to have done this. And then during the time that he went out, he described an OBE he had that he was watching. He was on the outside. He was watching the procedure being done, oscillating between there and almost like a chilly blue waiting room. I'm sure that maybe that had something to do with the chilly blood that was coursing through his veins. But either way, again, consciousness separated from the physical body. And I wanted to bring this up to you because I'm sure, obviously it combines both your profession and major influence and interest in your life. But I was wondering, in any of the years since 2008, you have been able to talk with patients in a similar sense of, their out-of-body experiences during operations you performed.
Well, not in any of the patients that I operated on have I heard that story, an out-of-body experience. I heard many other things that suggested to me, like I tell the story in Proof of Heaven about the young woman who had the beautiful dream of her father, the vision of her father, and it had to do with the fedora, yellow fedora, etc. But things that people see and get, when their brain should be in no shape to acquire any information at all. And those stories are all through the near-death experience literature. You find many, many cases of that, of people witnessing resuscitation, et cetera, from just above their body, above their physical body, et cetera. So those kind of stories are very common. But I can't claim that any of the patients that I've operated on has reported that kind of thing to me.
Okay. Well, I mean, Dr. Alexander, this has been a wonderful hour almost. Thank you for all the time. Obviously, I'll be linking to your website, and hope everybody goes and reads your books, watches your many videos all over the internet. Are there any things coming up, any appearances, any publications you want to bring any attention to and plug? Go right ahead.
Well, I think the main thing to point out, for one thing, Proof of Heaven, the book, is now in its 10th anniversary edition. There are 36 new pages in that book beyond the original book. Those pages tell a lot of what's happened in the last 10 years. So I'd say that's a very important addition and a good reason to buy the book again if you bought it earlier. And again, I highly recommend the book that I wrote with Karen Newell, Living in a Mindful Universe. That is actually the proof of heaven. The book Proof of Heaven is a question mark. It's like a neurosurgeon has an extraordinary experience like millions of others, but how do you explain it? Living in a Mindful Universe goes a long way towards explaining it. So I would highly recommend people check into those books. Certainly go to ebenalexander.com. Again, I recommend the recommended reading list, the FAQ page, the list of interviews, and also just all information, all the books is there. Go to sacredacoustics.com to learn more about meditative techniques. Go to innersanctumcenter.com, INNER sanctumcenter.com. That's a site that Karen and I put together. It's got multiple different avenues of people to get engaged, learn more about this. Some are paid, some are free, what have you, but many different options there to learn more about this. So innersanctumcenter.com, and that includes a monthly session that Karen and I hold with fans, a discussion. So if you want to sign up for that, come on down.
Wonderful.
We have a lot of fun with that group. So many different ways you can stay in touch with us.
And I hope they do. I have ebenalexander.com in the description of this episode. So as this goes out, hopefully everybody can go and, aside from you just giving them those websites right now, hopefully they can get there from the main website and just start clicking around and stay in touch with you for all the years to come. Thank you for everything, Doctor, and I hope we get to speak again one day again.
Well, I hope we do too, Frank. Thanks so much for having me on tonight, and thanks for getting this out to the world. And yes, I'd love to talk to you again sometime, and maybe we could even include my partner, Karen.
That would be.
She has a tremendous amount to teach about spirituality and using sound for deep meditation, etc. She's been a beautiful kind of angel to me. So let's get her on, and we'll have another discussion.
I'd appreciate that greatly. We'll be in touch. Thank you. Have a wonderful night.
All right, you too, Frank. Thanks a lot.
There you
Bye-bye.
go. Dr. Eben Alexander, ladies and gents, and we are going to go on a tiny little bit of an extended break. Going to play a Set the Charge classic, and then we'll be back to take your super chats, some calls, and we'll put a nice bow on this one. What a great, this is the kind of Thursday night I like. I like the deep dive Thursday nights, and that was one hell of a deep dive. I'm sure that there is going to be thoughts, varied thoughts, and I want to hear them all. So, or as many as we can. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Time doesn't have an intention. Roads are only inventions. Plans are just writings on paper. Thoughts are a lot like paper. Thoughts are a lot like looking for a sign, something that's empty and blinding, so that I may find truth in the theory surrounding. I know there's a reason, but I can't tell you why. There are cycles and seasons, or why this cynical world keeps spinning. Time doesn't have an
It's intermission time, folks. Time out to press the like button. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to
Quite frankly.
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 We all support, quite frankly.
Not quite.
Quite frankly.
Let's go, Brandon.
Quite frankly, in Roma, Italia.
Quite frankly. You going on Frank's show tonight?
I want to get a Coke. Can I get a Coke?
So everybody watch, quite frankly, with Frank.
Dare you.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Happy to have you here. Happy to have you here. Thursday night, we're moving right along. We got a great audience hanging with us. Tomorrow should be another good one. We'll chill. I think Matt's going to be here. And it's the end of the week, so we can talk about a whole mess of things. Leftovers, pick fun at one thing or another. Maybe I'll find some funny highlights from the impeachment hearing. Did you watch a moment of that? I didn't. Spared myself. But we're going to take some calls. We're going to go into the super chats. Let's start with the Rumble rants. 925 Wild G says, sounds to me that he's describing the brain as a filtering limiter of reality. Would he agree? I would say that he agrees. That's how he was describing it. He had gotten to so many things before I can ask it, but then again, this is what he's been doing for almost 20 years now, talking about this and getting to the bottom of what was happening, and especially when you talk about what came first, the brain or the consciousness. It is clear, especially when somebody has not enough brain activity to be able to generate a dream or a hallucination, from rejoining everything on the other side. But that is a great question to ask, and if we ever have Dr. Alexander back on with his colleague in the in the next year or something, that's something that maybe we would bring him back sometime in 2024. Please, Jay, if you see him pop up on the schedule ever again, send me in all of your questions, especially that question. That was a good one. Let's see here. Jay again says spelled consciousness wrong. Okay, I thought so. I was like, conciseness? Well, anywho, there you go. Thank you so much for that. Hope you enjoyed. Over on Foxhole, we've got a bunch of gold pills over here. River Pike says, thanks, Frank. Thank you. Thank you over and over again. Robert Sarnes, Bois Blanc, River Pike again. Bois Blanc again. Secret Nature says, thank you, Frank. Thank you, Secret Weapon. Secret Weapon. Secret Nature was our CBD sponsor. Haven't heard from them in a while. Hope they're all right. Tempo 420. Aloe Writer. And J. Jules. J. Jules says, ask about pets in heaven. Please, Frank, although you probably won't get this in time. I did not. But that is another one, Jules. If you can please email that to me whenever Dr. Alexander is back on the schedule, that would be great. Between that and the morphine question, those are two very interesting ones. Two interesting ones. Okay, Jay Britt says, great guest. Thanks, Frank. This is on, quite frankly, superchat.com. Larkstar with an extremely generous offering to the show. She's another one of those breathtaking supporters out there. Frank, bravo. Another delightful guest. With then you played my favorite, Vapor. After such an emotionally uplifting show tonight, so powerful, had to gift you something special to get on the record. Get better every night. Much love to all. It was emotionally uplifting. I mean, to consider that possibility, there's, because to be able to dip into those waters and to investigate this is to essentially give assurances about things that are usually the domain of faith. And whereas I have faith having knowledge is something totally different. And boy, to have knowledge of a world like that waiting for you on the other side is really, really incredible. Really incredible. But of course, it always comes down to something else. I'm okay with the idea of death. I just want to be finished. I want to be finished with everything. I don't want to leave people behind too soon. I just, whatever. But there is another thing there too. Many times in the past when we'll talk about reincarnation, the idea of it over here, whether you believe in it or not, I had expressed my thoughts about it. The thing that makes me most uncomfortable about the idea of reincarnation is the idea that I can close my eyes for the last time, take my last breath, and then I'll be born again somewhere in Calcutta with a whole new group of people that are unlike the ones I'm with right now. I don't like that idea. You say, well, if it is the case, you wouldn't remember it, and it would be just as natural as it is right now with you and Lauren and Aurora, your mom, your dad, your brother, all of your friends. And I'm saying right now, in my seat right now, I don't want to be separate from these people. I want to do it again with these people, if there is anything to do again. I don't like that idea. Now, if you tell me that I'm going through multiple lives with that same Aurora spirit there, the same Lauren spirit, and everybody is just, fluttering around each other like a, that would be something nice, like fireflies. They always stay together. That would be nice. I don't like that whole idea of separation and, just popping up on the other side of the galaxy somewhere, and that was all you saw, those people, just one short lifetime. I don't like that. Snowstube, thank you so much. Ben Farina, what's going on, Ben? Great show. Our grandparents are there. Beautiful to think about. Yes. That is all. The family faces, that was it. The family faces. And I can see how those will take shape. Those are faces that we know. God's face. I would never I don't know who's worthy of seeing that. And I never really ever knew what I thought about the actual face of God. Is it a human face? I don't know. Honestly, even in my lowest points of faith, I always saw God or conceptualized God as a creative power to the earth, and of course that is a masculine power. That is why any tradition will, most traditions refer to God as He, the Father, because to create the universe, to put in motion what we are sitting in right now, that is a masculine energy. But to ever try to conceive of what the face of God is and to project that onto Him is that's far above my pay grade. But as long as I get to see my grandparents again, that would be A-okay. Fine by me. Graydon Sharp says, hi Frank, love your show. Could you please wish my roommate Phoenix a happy birthday? Thank you. You got it, Graydon. Phoenix, happy birthday, and what a night to have a birthday. Graydon and Phoenix having a good time watching, quite frankly, and now you go to sleep, have some good dreams about all the beauty to come after we create all the beauty we can over here. Dawn in Ohio says, another wonderful show. What an amazing guest. That's Dawn in Ohio on Rumble. The Rumble Rants. I'm really happy that everybody's having a good time. Okay, so here's what we have in the last 20 minutes. We've got the open line, general line, for whatever you want to say about tonight. Please keep it on topic because I don't want to talk about the Joe Biden and the Republican Party tonight. 914-200-0269. And then there is also an NDE hotline. NDE hotline. Do you have a near-death experience? What was that? A post-death communication, a near-death, after-death communication, an ADC. That is what was published by the Guggenheims. That was a question that was submitted to me by by Krista, who is a producer of the show. But he got to it before I could. After-death communications. Any general thoughts at all? Let's take a call. Let's take a call with 314. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, Frank. Patrick.
Patrick, go right ahead.
Yes, sir. I can relate to your esteemed guest there today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I called maybe a year ago about a near-death experience in your archives. I actually did die, but it don't matter. I came back and I had whatever out-of-body experience and a few apparitional experiences. But it's been going on forever since then. And there's so many stories, but there's one good one I can relate to. And he was talking about, and I left my ex probably 10 times in 1 year through separation. One of my exes staying at couch surfing at a friend.
Patrick, I gotta say, I gotta say, I love that you called in, but I'm having a hard time following you. You're kind of mumbling, and if you could just speak up a little bit and get right to the point.
So I stayed at my buddy's. I was outside, kind of just staring at he bought his house, his parents' house there. I'm staring at this tree in the backyard, and then bam, it just hit me. I was everything. Everything was me. My ego was completely gone. It was so spiritual, I guess. It was timeless. I didn't know if it was eternity or it lasted a moment, but it hit me. And then I went back in and I said, "Hey, Fred." I didn't want to tell him, but I said, "You know what just happened?" He's all, "You know what? That tree actually picked me when he was a 10-year-old child and brought him down to the earth when he fell from it." And I'm all, well, that makes perfect sense. Anyway, there's so much.
Well, okay, so you're saying is that you had some sort of an out-of-body experience. You got hit with something far bigger than you can ever imagine. As you were awake and you were near a tree in your friend's house, and it was the tree that had some. You said the tree had some sort of a power that had done something to your friend as well.
Yes, but I don't know that. It was just in the middle of the day, and I was stone cold sober, and I was feeling sorry for myself, ego, and all that shit. And
that's it. Okay.
Amazing awakening.
All there, and perhaps the tree was a conduit. You never know, especially those ancient ones. Thank you for the call, Patrick. I'm glad we got that one out. I didn't know we were going for a second, but that's the first time I ever heard of somebody getting struck with that kind of enlightening lightning as they were awake. 914. Let's go into the hotline. 369-1236. Okay, so 561. You're on the air. Give us your NDE.
Well, I did have an NDE, Frank. This is Lightbulb in your chat.
Hello, Lightbulb.
And I had an NDE in 1976, except that I did not die. I was attending a Bible seminary, and a crisis in the family came up, and I was praying to God, and I was taken in spirit to heaven. I went through the tunnel. I was in the presence of an angel, although I never saw the angel. And very much what Dr. Alexander said, I could relate very much to many of the things that he said. I was not so, ethereal as him. I had a spiritual body. I was in the presence of God, but I never saw God because the angel told me if I looked at God, I wouldn't be able to come back. Now, the difference being, of course, I never died. Are you there?
I am. I'm listening.
Oh, okay. Too much happened to me to be able to say, but the thing is true, same with me, with the time. Time is different here and there, but things there are much, much more real. For instance, I can remember, even though this happened in 1976, when I was 18 years old and I'm 66 now, I can remember the blades of grass. I can remember the beauty of the place. I can remember the crystal floor that was before the Lord. I saw a river. I saw a map of all of human history. It was just quite remarkable. I saw many, many things. And I've been trying all my life to talk to somebody, to find somebody who has had NDEs that were similar to mine. And, it was just wonderful to hear your guest and to have some commonalities in his experience.
Lightbulb. One question I have for you before, and thank you for their contribution tonight. I'm happy you got through. But like our last guest, our last caller that just got in, you were able to make this journey to this place, to the other side, just through what, a prayer session? You were awake and you put yourself.
No. I did not believe that it was possible. I did not try to go there. I was taken there in the spirit.
But when? During a dream?
While I was praying? No. I went over it. I tried to talk myself out of the fact that it couldn't possibly have happened to me, because according to my Christian faith, I was in the Christian church and I was in a Bible seminary. I was in Bible college. I didn't believe these things happened. So I just didn't think that could happen, because even though the Bible talks about people traveling in the spirit, or say Enoch who walked the earth no more, etc., these sorts of things, I didn't think that could happen to me. Mm-hmm. But the Lord took me. Now, I tried to repeat it and go back. I was devastated that I had to come back to earth.
That's another thing. That's another thing we hear a lot about, is that they don't. It's once it is over, it is. Even though you're surrounded by all the people, if you were given the choice on Earth, you would never leave them. But once you're there, it just seems like the choice is easy to stay, and it can be a little devastating. That's what I hear. Lightbulb, thank you for the call. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. Thanks for the show.
Wonderful, just wonderful call. That reminds me of that old that Golden Girls episode where Sophia has a near-death experience, and then she wants to go back so bad she throws herself off the roof. You just see her fall through the on the other side of the window. That made me laugh as a kid. I liked it. 914-200-0269. You can call in with whatever you like, or if you want to hit up the NDE hotline, the 914-369-1236 number has been designated for that tonight. Let's take a call from the general line. What's going on, sir?
I was calling because I had a near-death experience actually 6 months ago yesterday.
Wow. Okay.
But
is there anything about that experience that you want to share in particular before we move?
It was really a weird situation because, time seemed to go so fast because I was in a coma for over a month.
Well, that's a significant amount of time. You're there for 3 weeks longer than Dr. Alexander.
Right.
But you're saying that as you for the last time you were conscious, you went asleep into the coma, and then what it felt like no time had passed at all? Just next thing you remember, you're open?
Yeah, actually, the first hospital I was in, I didn't even realize I was in that hospital.
So was the experience because we're running out of time, was the experience a positive one or a negative one for you?
It was kind of a positive.
Kind of.
It's like I had weird dreams and that while I was in the coma.
You know what it is, and perhaps it was, the situation you were in, was it trauma? How bad was the brain damage? Because we have to remember that Dr. Alexander, his brain activity was brought down to practically nothing. He was brain dead. So if you had more brain activity, perhaps you had inflammation or something, or whatever was going on. If you had
there was blood on the brain.
Yes, but were you
they literally thought I was going to die.
right? But as far as brain activity goes, if you had enough activity there to have a dream, that could be something that you were living inside of your head and you weren't actually leaving the body just at that point. But still, that could be an interesting thing to throw into the mix there. I've actually said, because what you're describing, just weird dreams, and some of it seems to be positive. It kind of reminds me of the season 6 of The Sopranos, which I always thought that would happen. Oh man, God forbid! Please just keep me awake and healthy for as long as you can. But yeah, but I can imagine being just stuck in a dream world. I'd rather be flying around outside my body. But thank you for the call, sir.
Yeah, Nikki knows all about it because she was checking up on me, and Zozo dude was.
Well, what's your name?
Chats praying for me. John from Ohio.
Oh, John from Ohio. Okay. Well, then I never. Thank you for letting me know, and thank you Zoso and Nikki for keeping up with John. All right, man. Well, I hope you're feeling well, and stay in touch with the show. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, John from Ohio. See, it's a good thing to distinguish. Now that we learn about lack of brain activity, getting you closer to that side, can you imagine that is really what it is with the with mushrooms? Is that really it? I'm gonna look more into it. Now, Dr. Alexander is obviously, he has a quite a academic record and very smart guy. I wonder, I just, if you're to tell me that taking any kind of a hallucinogen, anything like that, was going to just make your brain light up like a Christmas tree if you were going to monitor it in some kind of a way. But he's saying that the best hallucinogenic experiences that really take you outside of your body are the ones that actually make your brain go dark, and I would have to imagine get you physically closer to the other side, that are bringing you closer to the brink of death. That's a scary thought. All right, let's take some more calls for whatever time we have left. Here's 1-860. You're on the air. Go right ahead.
Oh, hey. Hi, Frank.
Hi.
Thank you for taking the call. Hi. I wanted to tell you about a near-death experience that I had. I didn't almost die, but my grandmother did. So I don't know if you're interested in hearing about that.
Go right ahead. We have about 5 minutes left. So as long as you get to the juicy parts quickest, that would be the best.
Okay, the juicy parts. Okay, so she lived about 8 hours away from me, and she was living in a convalescent hospital in Southern California. And she wasn't particularly sick with anything. She just needed 24-hour care. So she'd been in there for a couple of years. And like I said, I lived about 8 hours away from her. And I, went to sleep about 10:30 one night, knowing that I had to wake up the next morning at 6:30 for work. And I kept waking up every hour. So like 11:30, 12:30, 1:30. And I kept waking up and thinking, what is going on here? Because I was getting a little irritated because I had to work the next day and I had to be there at 6:30. So I woke up again, and it was not 2:30, but it was 2:20. And so I looked around, and I couldn't really focus clock all that well. I could see what time it was, but I realized, like, I can't really see around this room like I could before. And then all of a sudden, I just felt like, oh, there's somebody there in the room with me, in front of me. But I knew that wasn't possible because I had a desk right there. And it was my grandmother's desk. And then I just felt like, and I could kind of see like this kind of white mass thing kind of moving towards me. And pretty soon I felt like it was like right next to me, literally right next to me, standing right next to me. And then I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like something just like flew right through my body. And I felt like I was just like lifted into the air super fast, and I was kind of being transported up into the sky, and all I could see were stars everywhere. And I was like moving at warp speed at that point. And the higher I got, I could see like a bright light that you talk about, or that they, people that have died talk about. And I just felt like it was getting narrower and narrower. And then I got to a certain point, and I kind of slowed down, and I just had this overwhelming thought that like everything that matters is love. Everything is, we're all connected together, and the only thing that matters is love. And for a second, I felt like I knew every question or every answer about the universe, about everything.
Wow.
Anything and everything. Yeah.
Too bad you couldn't bring back a couple of those answers, because we definitely need them. But where does your grandmother come into this? Because I thought when you started telling the story that you were getting into an after death communication story where your grandmother was in your room. But now it sounds like you were brought on an out of body experience, like one that we have talked about many times with Albert Taylor.
I don't know. Maybe you have. I don't know. But all I know is that the instant I just thought like, okay, I know everything about everything. And then I realized I couldn't remember. I woke up, and then I was in bed, and I knew immediately that my grandmother had died. And sure enough, like the next morning, my dad called me, and he's like, your grandmother died. I said, yeah, I know she died at 2:30, which freaked him out. He was in the same city as she was. And the thing is I was only 18 at the time, so this was back in the 70s. There wasn't really anything on TV or radio, or I hadn't read a book or anything. And so I just kind of, after people kind of rolled their eyes at me, I just kept that experience to myself for a long time. But I really feel like she kind of took me up with her somehow, up to a certain point where I was allowed to go. I was only allowed to go to a certain point.
Yeah.
And then
that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like sounds like you went for a ride with Grandma as she was going back home.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I thank you for the call. That is we've got some pretty unique ones tonight. I really do appreciate you getting through, my friend, and I hope I hear from you again soon.
Okay, thanks.
There you go. Oh, shit. So sorry. Somebody who's doing chat room bingo on Gilded just got Frank cut off somebody too soon. I think her name was Ruth. That was great. I thought that was going into the ADC, after death communications area, because I had this already in case we went in there if we had the extra time. Sensing a presence. These are the types of ADCs that the Guggenheims put together. Hearing a voice, feeling a touch, smelling a fragrance. So olfactory ADCs. You think I have a little bit more of those with this shenanigans of mine, but no. None so far. Partial appearances, full appearances, a glimpse beyond. You may see an image of a deceased loved one in a picture that is either two-dimensional and flat or three-dimensional like a hologram. It's like seeing a 35mm slide or a movie suspended in the air. These are usually in radiant colors and may be seen externally with your eyes open or internally in your mind while your eyes are closed. Then there's encounters at alpha, more than a dream, sleep state ADCs, out-of-body ADCs. Happen while you are asleep or in a deep meditative state. They are very dramatic experiences which you leave your physical body and visit your loved one in a place nearby, at another location on Earth, or within the physical universe. It's called Homeward Bound. Or in the spiritual dimension called Heaven. I have to imagine that that's what Ruth had. She had a out-of-body ADC, where her grandmother came and grabbed her and said, hey, I'm going home. You want to go for a ride? Sounds like it. Anyway, so much more There's so much more we could have done if we had just a couple more hours, right? But tomorrow is another night. It's Friday, so I would invite many of you to call in tomorrow night with some NDE stories, with anything else that we have left over from this week. Stranger stories, there's a few of those that are still in. And let's just do a little bit of mop-up, and we'll have some fun, and it'll be variety, and Matt will be here. We'll crack some jokes. How does that sound for a Friday night? Sounds pretty good to me. Sounds pretty good, pretty easy to write. So that's what I'll be doing. In the meantime, I want to tell you all about what's going on for Throwback Thursday tonight on QuiteFrankly.tv. If you're already there, you don't have to go anywhere. But everybody else, go to QuiteFrankly.tv. We have a vintage Frankly episode from 2020. Many fascinating videos in between, and a 1977 sci-fi cult classic. That's what's going on the air on Quite Frankly, the network, on QuiteFrankly.tv. So go do it, and thank you all so much for everything. I want to go to the Super Chats one more time. Thank you so much to Delona, who dropped fleets. Thank you, Delona, for 2 fleets. On Foxhole. Thank you, Witchy Poo. So many cookies. And then more from Delona and Witchy Poo and 123 SKG. I'm dropping the scratching your arse right now. Thank you to everybody on the Rumble. Thank you for all those Rumble rants. You know, I encourage you guys and gals, especially on YouTube. I left YouTube on tonight just because this was not going to be too controversial in a YouTube sense. And I just encourage you to go and check out Rumble. If for any other reason, then you have the Rumble rants there that are, I think, just as good, if not, I think better, way better, because the percentages are better than we used to have with the Super Chats. So Rumble has the Super Chats we used to have on YouTube, and I'd have to imagine that those will be around a little bit longer than we had with the Google company. But thank you guys for everything, and thank you for everybody who's watching, no matter where you're watching. That's all I have. And over on, we have Todd Fife. Says, happy 100,000, Frank. And he's saying that from Rockfin. Imagine that. I actually have one other person from Rockfin from last night. I forgot to say this last night because it came in way too late, and I didn't see it. Late. Guy with a GoPro fishing show tipped $5 last night on Rockfin and said, listening on and off since 2018, the good old days, from one drummer to another, you're one hell of a percussionist, and no one brings us Clown World Incorporated events of the day like you, brother. Hashtag grow food, hashtag buy bullets. Thank you, Guy with a GoPro fishing show. Sounds like something that Abe would like. He's a fisherman. A competitive fisherman out there in the Midwest. That's all for me. Thank you again to Dr. Eben Alexander. I will see you shortly. I'll see you on QuiteFrankly.tv tonight, hanging out and watching all the throwback stuff. Good night. Goodbye. No. No.
I'll catch you on the flip side.
Bye-bye, boys.
Have fun storming the castle.
Think it'll work?
It would take a miracle.
Bye-bye.